My name is Sarah Blute. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Molecular Virology and Microbiology at Baylor College of Medicine. I'm also the director of the 3D Organoid Core at Baylor College of Medicine and the Texas Medical Center Digestive Disease Center GEMS Core. The title of our manuscript is Human Intestinal Organoids from Cronkhite Candida Syndrome Patients Reveal a Link Between Serotonin and Proliferation. Rare diseases are defined as a disease that affects fewer than 200,000 people in the United States. However, if you add up the total number of rare diseases, there are more than 7,000 diseases, making the overall number of people affected by any type of rare disease to be 1 in 10 Americans. Rare diseases are different than more common diseases because many times it's difficult to obtain a diagnosis for a rare disease. It is difficult to find physicians that can treat a rare disease. The person affected feels scared and orphaned by the healthcare system, and there are limited treatment options. Rare diseases are present across the medical spectrum, and some are widely recognized, while others are less well known. Approximately 95% of rare diseases have no treatment. Cronkhite Candida syndrome is a rare disease that affects 1 in 1 million individuals. It does not appear to have a genetic linkage and results in a high mortality rate. It is characterized by many non-cancerous intestinal growths called polyps that cause diarrhea and an inability to absorb nutrients. The disease also has other clinical features including poor nail growth, fatigue, hair loss, and skin hyperpigmentation. New models are needed to study rare diseases. We used a new technology in which a small piece of intestine called a biopsy is taken from a patient with Cronkhite Candida syndrome. A stem cell, which can make part of the intestine, is grown outside the body and can be made into a model of the human intestine called an intestinal organoid. Using organoids from Cronkhite Candida syndrome patients, we learned something new about the disease. When we looked at the organoids under the microscope, we saw that the organoids grew faster and they had more of a rare cell type called an enteroendocrine cell. When we went back to look at the intestine in the patient, we saw that the patient also had more of these cells, which are shown on the bottom in green. We investigated the enteroendocrine cell further to see if something was wrong with it in Cronkhite Candida syndrome. We found that the enteroendocrine cells in Cronkhite Candida syndrome are making more of a product called serotonin. Serotonin is usually thought to be responsible for making you happy and plays a big role in the nervous system. But in the gut, serotonin appears to also play a role in making the intestine regenerate. In the case of Cronkhite Candida syndrome, we think it's making the intestine grow too much, causing polyps to form. The production of serotonin by the enteroendocrine cell in Cronkhite Candida syndrome is like a radio with the volume turned up too high. A normal volume is pleasant, but when turned up too high, the volume is unpleasant and distorted. Next, we tried to tune the volume of the radio to see what would happen. We took healthy organoids and turned up the volume by treating them with serotonin and observed that they acted like Cronkhite Candida syndrome organoids by growing abnormally. We also took Cronkhite Candida syndrome organoids and turned the volume down by treating them with drugs that inhibited serotonin. And we saw that the organoids behaved like healthy organoids and stopped growing. Our work implies that increased enteroendocrine cells produce too much serotonin that results in increased growth of the intestinal epithelium. This increased level of serotonin might also explain the other clinical symptoms that the patients experience. If we can find ways to turn down the radio and reduce the amount of serotonin using drugs that affect the enteroendocrine cell and its serotonin production, we might improve the overall health and well-being of the patients that suffer from this rare disease.